Greetings all. Welcome back. Lovely to have your company for the afternoon session of CALDWays 2022. If you've just joined us, A, where the hell have you been? And I'm Brett DeHoot, your MC. Okay. The most asked question in Australia each and every day is, what's for dinner? I'm going to delve deeper and ask you to check out that live Q&A and tell us what you had for lunch. And I'm hoping to see a diverse range of cuisines and dietary options. So live Q&A, what did you have for lunch? Hopefully you all have, so you're sustained, because there's a lot of learning going on. You do that as I tell you what to look forward to. Marketing to called communities. We're going to meet more new and emerging communities. We're going to talk about translation and interpreting services. 2 sessions on that. And the changes to the Commonwealth Home Support Program. And aren't they going to be new and exciting for you? So live Q&A. Thank you. Okay, what's on the menu? Oh, please, Jasmine, broccoli and chicken salad. Okay, we get it. You're better than us. Norman's wanted to be appalled. Chicken sandwich and a big mug of coffee. Ailsa, how can you combine coffee with something savory? That's wrong. I'm not to judge, but I'm judging. And savory and coffee, you fail. But thank you for your contribution. Batul Musa, you win. Beef rendang. Over rice, yes, it's getting some reception here in my home. Whoa. Rebecca's doing breakfast for lunch, crunchy nut cornflakes. Actually, beef, and I did the reverse. Beef rendang in Malaysia was in Kuala Lumpur was the best breakfast I think I've ever had in my life. Fresh beef rendang, hot roti, off the pan, and they call that breakfast. What a lurk, the Malaysians are onto it. All right, thank you for your contributions. There's no prizes. I'm just delving into your personal lives. And Ailsa, we need to talk. Cancel your 4 o'clock. Chicken sandwich, yes. Mug of coffee, yes. Combination, no. Okay. On to more serious issues. We're going to talk about translation and interpreting services. We have Andrew Graham about to join us. He's the National Client Liaison Manager with TIS, Translating and Interpreting Service. Now, in a room such as this, you probably know what that is. It's a service offering exactly what it says on the can, translation and interpreting services. It's a government service competing with many private providers. And I think we heard earlier on today from Sarah about how it can place a lot of pressure on workers who do not specialize in translation, interpretation, to suddenly be having to offer that on an impromptu basis just because they happen to speak a certain language or be from a certain culture. Now, we're hoping Andrew may be doing a 2-part presentation with Sonny, his colleague, but for the moment, please make him digitally welcome, Andrew Graham. Over to you, sir.
Introduction. Really pleased to be with you today and have the opportunity to talk about TIS National and some of the interpreting services that we provide nationally. Many of you would have been familiar already with TIS National and some of the services that we provide as an organisation, but also there may be many on the line that are not familiar or have never used us before. So really the purpose of today is to go through our service offerings, talk a little bit to how to access and effectively use an interpreter through multiple interpreting channels, and really talk about some of the funding free interpreting services available to service providers in the aged care sector, and some of the supports that are available through TIS National to enable them to support their CALD clients and residents. So what I'm going to do is share my screen now, and then we'll kick off the presentation. I can see my colleague Sonny has joined me. So Sonny is a senior account manager with TIS National, and he works in the Commonwealth government space, and particularly in the aged care sector. So we'll just kick off now, and I'll just get my presentation up. So I'm hoping everyone can see that now. Yep, great. So TIS National, as I mentioned, is a is a national supplier of essential language services. We have two overarching missions. First, connect government services, businesses, and the Australian community through credentialed, secure interpreting services. And additionally, to ensure that we have equal access and equity to services and information for CALD residents and clients in Australia. So let's just snap the slide here. Yep. Okay. So Transitional delivers interpreting services through a panel of interpreters. We have approximately 2,700 independent contractors and cover up to 157 languages and dialects. We have a 24/7 interpreting support mechanism that's available every day of the year, and that is our contacts 131450. That can be called at any time and an interpreter requested. TIS allocates, to ensure that our clients get the highest level of interpreting quality, our allocation policy is to offer the highest NAATI credentialed interpreter available, the job or request. So any bookings or immediate phone jobs that come through are first offered to the highest NAATI credentialed interpreter to ensure that we are getting the highest certified people available. And the other feature is really the unique ability for TIS to provide a service to not only agency staff to initiate interpreter requests to speak with their CALD clients, but also to CALD communities in Australia, individuals who wish to get information from agencies, be they government or private. They can call TIS National on 131450 and be put in touch for free with an interpreter and connected with that agency. So the objectives today for our short presentation are really to address any shortfall in awareness or knowledge about what interpreting options are available in the Australian market or with TIS National themselves, how to access and effectively use an interpreter, and what would be the most appropriate channel to use in what circumstance, and then really to explore and inform you of the type of funded arrangements that we currently have in place, not only in the aged care sector, but across the disability sector. And as you know, the Department of Home Affairs free interpreting service. So firstly, I'll kick off by just looking at our 5 separate channels of interpreting services. To couple the first 2 together, we have phone immediate services. So that being the immediate phone service on 131450, and the one at the bottom there called Automated Telephone Interpreting Service, ATIS. Now both these channels are very similar. The only difference being that ATIS is an automated service, so no operator is involved, and it can only be used by agency staff who have a client code with TIS National. So, so effectively with ATIS, a staff member would call 1800-131-450, have an account number they can plug into the IVR, request the language, and be automatically connected with an interpreter through an automatic connection service. It would just allow and require that staff member to be able to conference that non-English speaker in on the call. The immediate phone interpreting service is a little different in that it's available to CALD individuals as well as agency clients to initiate an interpreter simply by calling 131450 and speaking with the operator. The other options that we have available require booking, and these bookings take place in an online booking form called TIS Online. Now, this is the primary tool that our clients use to currently book on-site face-to-face interpreters, and also pre-book phone interpreters, including our pilot program, which we'll get into a bit more detail about video interpreting under telehealth. So key requirement for making bookings through TIS National is to have a client code and to have individual login details. So let's have a look at each circumstance here. So just some suggestions in an aged care setting of where it's most appropriate to use what channel. Key message with the immediate phone interpreting service is that it's on demand and it's available 24/7. So in cases of emergency, in cases, unplanned cases where an interpreter is required straight away, it's an unplanned scenario, it's probably the best option to go for to get someone on the line quickly. Having said that, there is some shortcomings in some circumstances with the immediate phone service, particularly in the case if you require a rare or unusual language where the TIS National Panel may only have 1 or 2 interpreters in that language available. It's less likely that those interpreters will be available through the immediate service. They may be, but in some cases they may not be. And a pre-booked option may be a better option for you moving forward. The other thing to consider with the immediate phone service is that because it is an on-demand service, interpreters are making themselves available in and around their existing bookings. So in some circumstances, you may not be able to maintain the interpreter for lengthy engagements, where I'm talking sort of half an hour, 45 minutes or more, purely because interpreters may have future bookings in place that they need to commence. So again, I think it's with using the immediate service, it's always a question of, if it's a really lengthy and complex engagement, there's probably better options available for us. If it's a quick 15, 20 minute sort of engagement to get something sorted out, it's the best option. So coming into pre-book phone, so the difference with pre-book phone obviously is you can make a booking of up to 30 minutes through our booking portal, a minimum of 30 minutes, I should say. Really a great channel to use if you have an upcoming appointment, if it requires any sense of complexity or length of engagement. If you need any sort of specialist skills involved from that interpreter, through pre-book there is an opportunity for you to capture that information in the required information field to ensure that that happens. And again, just coming back to the limited languages, if you use the pre-book phone service, you're most likely going to be able to secure the services of an interpreter where there's only 1 or 2, and they can schedule a future appointment into their calendars. One other point with these is that you could also use one interpreter for multiple clients during a predetermined period of time, which can be, in some settings, can be, really an efficient way to use an interpreter. Okay. And on-site, obviously we know working in the aged care sector and a lot of colleagues requiring on-site face-to-face interpreters for lengthy engagements, including assessments, home care, home visits, and others, with clients having specific needs, being hearing impaired and that type of thing, it is a requirement. So obviously on-site is an option. A 90-minute booking is required. Again, with specific languages in specific geographic locations, it can be difficult purely because we're relying on a pool of interpreters that are local to the specific location of that meeting. And that's one of the main differences with on-site compared to the video option and pre-book phone. And I'll just keep moving along. Ooh. So I just wanted to tuck in this announcement around our remote video service. Up until in late 2020, in response to some of the restrictions around movement that were being experienced with COVID, we found that a lot of our clients weren't able to engage interpreters for on-site bookings. So we stood up a pilot program for telehealth consultations for medical professionals, which involved a minimum 90-minute booking for video. We are now transitioning out of that pilot program. So July 4th, we'll be launching a new remote video service, which will have a minimum 30-minute booking and be available to all clients. Some of the benefits of remote video are the fact that you're going to be able to access a national pool of interpreters, but also have the benefits of having visual body language cues with interpreters in that sort of forum, and has some definite benefits to over phone interpreters. So again, that will be coming out, and there'll be more communication to our clients regarding that change over the following weeks. Okay, so also just want to now touch on some of the funded programs available through Transitional, and obviously working in aged care settings, I'm going to talk about these specifically. So Transitional has an agreement, or is the selected supplier of the Department of Health for its aged care funded interpreting programs. So we have arrangements in place for multiple aged care programs for eligible service providers. So basically, there is information available through the Department of Health website about how to access and how to register for a client code under these programs. So I guess of the ones listed here, I'd say that residential aged care facilities, home care packages, and Commonwealth Home Support Programs are most probably our highest frequency of clients using, but we have a selection of other supports available. One key point to make here is for each program, a separate client code is required, so for the purposes of that program. So you may see that some agencies need multiple client codes in order to work across multiple programs. Okay, so I might just talk about how one would go about accessing and then going through the process of registering and setting up their agency to use a funded program. So as I said, all the advice regarding the Department of Health's interpreting funded programs are available on their website. And this information is actually quite good and detailed in terms of giving advice of how to register for a Transitional account through the online registered electronic registration form. And by following those instructions, it actually comes through to us in a form that we immediately recognise as under that particular program. We can, from time to time, get registrations that come through, which we're uncertain about, so we need to engage directly back with that client as to determine which funded program they wish to access. So really good information available from the Department of Health on their website. The second thing that we recommend for our clients is to do a check within their organisation to see if they have any Transitional accounts that are active and live. Given the self-registration is quite an easy process to do, we can see that we get multiple requests for duplicate accounts under programs. So it's always good to check internally to see if, for instance, a residential aged care facility already has a Transitional approved account before going and registering another one. If unsure, you can always check with Transitional through our Frontline information client service. So the registration process itself is basically it's a self-registration process through the Transitional website, and this can be accessed through the front page selecting register as a Transitional client. Now the process itself probably take 5 to 10 minutes to register. The administrator or the person registering in the account would be the main point of contact on that account, and would receive the client code once it's submitted almost instantaneously, which would be then available for booking and telephone inquiries. And we talked about having different codes. So the other thing, many agencies need not just one person to use their code, they need multiple users. So the other consideration for the administrator when registering an account is to take a tally of which people within the organisation need to have access. So we call this adding people as agents. And this can be done by the administrator through logging into the account and adding those details. Or alternatively, those staff can contact us in writing at tispromo@homeaffairs.gov.au to be added to that account. Once they're added, they'll get an email prompt providing them additional login details, and then they can go ahead and make their own bookings. So pretty much at that stage, you're ready to make an interpreter booking. Again, the bookings are made through our website by logging into TIS National or TIS Online through the icons on the page. If we use an on-site job, for instance, you would click on that, log in, use an electronic web form to fill in the details of your booking. And once that's confirmed, you would submit it. Now, the bookings are sent to interpreters in real time and allow the highest credentialed interpreters to accept that job first. Now, the notifications for clients are in the form of email and SMS. So you're typically advised when the job is registered, when it's allocated, and various other that don't come to mind. There are quite a few of other alerts that come through, including in some situations where an interpreter can't be found, that the job may need to be cancelled. Some other notes just on making bookings. Just to note that you can't actually transfer between channels, so you can't change from an on-site to a video to a pre-book. Our systems just can't allow that. And additionally, in terms of cancellations, we say 24 hours prior to the scheduled start time of the booking that a job should be cancelled without incurring a fee. Again, we speak to a lot of clients about specific information, specific requirements for their particular patients, and having that information detailed in the job. So that in the actual booking forms, there is a section and there is provision for information to be captured, which would allow the interpreter to be fully informed of the situation that they would need to interpret in. So for example, if there's a patient that has special needs, if there's any additional work health and safety requirements, vaccination requirements, this is the area that you would put that in. When that job is submitted, it's flagged by our channel support team who evaluate that requirement and then go about a manual allocation process to ensure that interpreter that's allocated is fully aware of and prepared for that upcoming booking. Okay. Just going to keep this moving along because I'm conscious of time. So TIS National provides a unique support service for clients as well. So anyone with a client code or registering with us to use our services, we have dedicated senior account managers. So we have a specialised senior account manager in the aged care profession, Jen, who can't be with us today, but she provides really great support to service providers and also is highly involved with PCAC and other organisations in providing educational presentations and training to staff on effective use of interpreters and how to maximise and optimise their bookings. She's also available during the week for any sort of troubleshooting or any other queries, account setups that need to take place. So in addition to that, we have a normal frontline inquiry support, which is our 1300 number, goes through to our frontline inquiries team, and our email address, tispromo. So both of which are picked up and responded to typically within 24 hours. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the TIS National feedback process. Feedback is, in this situation and running an interpreting service, is extremely important in terms of quality assurance and performance management in the interpreter space. As we said, interpreters are contractors. They work with us, they're NADI credentialed and work under the AUSIT the AUSIT standards under a deed. So what we really love our clients doing is providing compliments, complaints and suggestions around interpreter performance, around any TIS National policy or procedure in order for us to continuously improve. So our feedback process is located again through our website. It's again a web form, can be submitted in the form of a compliment, complaint or suggestion. For all interpreter conduct matters, every case is investigated and the interpreter involved is met with and the feedback discussed with that person. Now, once the investigation is concluded, a formal response will come back to that feedback item under the registered ID within 15 business days. Typically, any other sort of queries can be actioned much sooner through your senior account manager or escalated through them as well. So that, I think that is where I'm going to switch to my colleague here, Sunny, who is going to take you through a few pointers around the role of the interpreter and also just some tips around working with an interpreter in a couple of different aged care settings. Thanks.
Yeah, so please ask any questions at the end of the session if you want, or you can email us at any given time. We will be able to get back to you with the response or answer to your questions. So I'll start with, as Andrew mentioned, even though we are called translating and interpreting services, currently we do not do any translations. So the interpreter, what is the interpreting? Interpreting works with the spoken words in a particular context, conveying a message from one language to another. That's what pretty much interpreting is. That's what our interpreters are specialized with. Andrew, can you move to the next screen? And translation deals with the written text. And as I mentioned that we currently do not do any translations. So please feel free to approach NATI, N-A-A-T-I, who are specialized in translations, who are the governed body for all the interpreters and does the translation. So now let's talk about what is the interpreter's role here. So a professional interpreter will convey your message naturally and fluently from one party to the other party, so to the client to the service provider and vice versa. So an interpreter should never provide counseling or own opinion to clients and also to the service provider. So that's very, very important, and our interpreters do adhere with the code of conduct and the ethics which they have signed before joining this. So as I mentioned, interpreters are bound by ethical and professional standard of AUSIT, which is an Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translation. So interpreters should also take into consideration of the cultural sensitivities while communicating with either parties, and also should maintain integrity and impartiality at all given times. So clearly communicate everything that is said from either party without any distortion and omission or forming their own opinion. Sometimes you might see that a long sentences in English might be short in the languages which the client speaks, but that's the way it is. But the interpreter should never able to leave anything out from any of the conversation said by either party. And the interpreter should always be act in a professional manner while at the phone or at the face-to-face booking or in the video interpreting or at the site. Interpreter should never advocate or provide guidance or act in subject matter, offer personal opinions to the clients at any given time. So change the content and not the interpreters are not allowed to change the content or the meaning of the source what was communicated by the clients. So pretty much they have to say only word to word interpreting from the clients to the non-English speaker and the non-English speaker to the client. That's what the interpreter's role is, and they are not allowed to add or delete anything from either party. So that's the main thing. So let's talk about tips for working with interpreters. So what the one of the after talking to a lot of the clients and everything and also to the interpreters, we found out that short sentences or pausing often, which will help the interpreters to accurately interpret without any omission with the words, and also will give an opportunity for the client to respond or to ask any questions or if anything is not very clear. So that short sentences and pausing often is one of the very important critical during interpretation to be noted. If a call is going to be more than 30 minutes, if someone needs an interpreter urgently on immediate phone services, you call them and you wanted an interpreter urgently and it's going to be a 30 minutes duration, preempt to the operator saying that, hey, can you please check the availability of the interpreter, 30 minutes the call duration will be, so that the operator can check with the interpreter before conferencing the call with you guys to ensure the interpreter is available for the whole duration. So if you believe on, if while during the interpreting, if you think that there's something not right, if the client is upset or if the interpreter has raising the voice, please stop at that time and just ask the interpreter and also the client to ensure whether they are okay and everything is according to the conversation. If anyone is upset, please find out what's the reason behind that. It could be with the interpreter what said, what the content which was said, or whether the non-English speaker is not accepting with the content which was delivered by the non-interpreter. So please stop at that time and check with to make sure whether they are all comfortable. Always speak directly to your client, and the client also should speak directly to yourself so that the interpreter can sit in the middle and can communicate to each other. So while you are sitting face-to-face interpreting, try to sit on a triangle shape so that the conversation can happen at given time. And also one thing main to consider that always only one person to speak at any given time. So that's what it should be. So now we'll give you talks about the tips for the working with the interpreters on site. When you book an on site, if it is for a office or administration, the interpreters can come to the reception, introduce themselves and wait at the reception. Always ask the interpreter to show their ID card to verify the interpreter name and the booking is correct. And if the on-site booking is done on a client premises, the interpreter will not enter to the client premises without a professional. So the interpreter will be either waiting in the car depending upon the weather condition or will be standing outside the client's house. So the professional have to meet the interpreter outside the house and have to escort to the interpreter, to the non-English speaker, to the client's premises, because interpreter is not known to the client and the clients can get upset over the by knocking someone at the door who is unknown to the client. So that's the procedure. So please follow on that one. And if the interpreter is not available, please feel free to call our booking team and they will be able to chase up with the interpreter to find out the whereabouts of the interpreter. The interpreter mobile numbers are not provided to the non-English speaker or directly to the clients, because that's what the TC will be the mediator in finding out where the interpreter is. At the same time, if the interpreter is waiting and the professional has not arrived at the location, the interpreter will call channel support booking team and we will be chasing up with the professional to find out how far they are, what's happening, whether if the clinic is closed, what should we do. So these are some of the things to be taken into consideration. And one special thing also can be organized, as Andrew mentioned before, if you have any special requirement for a face-to-face booking, put it on the interpreter's instruction very clearly that please wear a safety hat when you come to the location, or the interpreter have to be vaccinated double dose, triple dose, or please carry your vaccination certificate, or if there is any other requirements, please put it on the interpreter's instruction and the interpreters will take note of it before arriving at the locations. So these are some of the tips which we have to do it. Happy to me and Andrew to take any questions, or as we said that you're more than happy to email us at any given time and we'll be able to respond to you guys within 24 hours, or you can call at 1300-655-820, select option 3 and 3 to come directly to our team, and you can ask for myself, Sunny, or Andrew, and we will be able to help you.
Thanks, Sonny. Yep, I just definitely confirm that by any means, if you have any questions at any time, that we're available through these details. and we'd be able to support you in any way that you need. So Brett, that concludes our presentation. If there are any questions at all, we'd be happy to take them now.
Andrew, Sunny, first up, thank you for your presentation and your obvious commitment to the service. Sunny, you actually gave us specific directions how to get through the voicemail system to you directly. That is unprecedented, and it has not gone unnoted, sir. Thank you. Look, I'm in a generous frame of mind. If you head to that live Q&A and throw in a question, we may get the chance to ask it. Also, by the way, whilst you're on the Q&A, you might see the website link for the PICAC Alliance. So if you have any questions, throw them on sooner rather than later. No, not about what you ate for lunch. That's over now. That conversation has been had and won and lost by some of us. I had a bowl of soup, by the way, for those of you playing at home and so fascinated by my eating habits. Pasta fagioli. All right. Well, thank you, Sunny and Andrew. You've given us your contact details and given us an oversight into how best to utilise your service. And also, I admire that commitment to the health and safety and well-being and happiness of your people providing the service. These contractors out there, you're not just throwing them into the wild, but there's obviously protocols that need to be respected. So thank you so much, gentlemen. If we can all give our presenters a little round of digital applause. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Andrew and Sunny.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. Lovely to have you here. Okay. So now let us continue on with our discussion without so much as a quick break on translation and interpretation services. Kwabana Answer joins us. And Kwabana Answer is the head of communities and strategy. I think plural, there's more than one strategies, Kwabana, am I right? Strategies, plural, with the LOTE agency. And I'm guessing at a gig like this, LOTE may stand for languages other than English. I may be totally wrong. He's part of consortium. All will be revealed about that. But Kwabana, I also want to thank you all, acknowledge the rather provocative title for your presentation, Why We Need You. I like that. That got my attention. So Kwabana, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brett, and thank you so much for your engaging presentation. I think it's important that we have someone like you, moderating these things. So I appreciate that. And hi, everybody. And I want to say thanks for having me here. Yes, as Brett mentioned, it is provocative. Why we need you, and I think why we need you, especially. As part of a consortium which Icon Agency heads up, followed by the LOTE Agency, Willangali, which is for our First Nations, and Able Australia, which is a disability service for adults and community support for seniors. So the title of my presentation is about the program that the consortium is doing for the Department of Health. It's about access to translating and interpreting services for culturally and linguistically diverse people. So with no further ado, I'll go straight into it. So obviously, as part of the consortium, as I mentioned, Willangali, our partner, project partner, has provided some insights just about acknowledgement of country. And one of the key things that they put forward is it gave us this amazing quote from Aunty Maureen Watson, and it said, "You cannot walk anywhere in Australia without stepping on land where an Aboriginal foot has already been." And I think that's really important. So I acknowledge that I'm hosting this online meeting from the lands of the Gadigal of the Uluru clans, who are the traditional custodians of this place we now call Sydney. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meeting. So as a consortium, we pay respect to those elders, both past and present. So today, the context of my presentation, the project that we're doing for the Department of Health, I'll talk a bit about the background, the audience and channels in which the communication strategy is working towards, and the different types of stakeholders, and finish up with the implementation tactics, including the community tactics across all three project partners. So the background. So connecting senior Australians in aged care services, access to translating and interpreting services for cultural and linguistically diverse people, is focused on enhancing the ability of senior Australians to access information, make informed decisions, and exercise choice through the timely and targeted provisions of interpreting and translating services, content and tools in their preferred language. We heard from Andrew and Sanal just in relation to how important TIS is, and the project that we're endeavouring to do is ensure that aged care providers, both home care and residential aged care, are essentially using the services of TIS to really, help communicate with the diverse audience. So it is a very important project that we are a part of. So where it started, I guess, the consortium has been working together to create a comprehensive communication and engagement strategy. And so that's been developed to drive awareness, uptake, and usage of existing TIS national interpreting services. This is fundamental to our project. And essentially, the driving of that awareness is where all our strategy is focused on, to help, as I mentioned before, to help aged care providers to really use that service even more. So what are we doing now? We are providing aged care peak bodies and providers with a new service. So that will produce digital assets. So right now, if you're an aged care provider or home care provider, you can now go on a website and you can request collateral translated into your recipient's preferred language. And I guess this is, we want you to promote the service across your organisation. We need you to ensure that this service is being utilised and getting that information to your consumer base, not consumer base, but residents in their preferred language. It's about supporting diversity in the aged care sector. I guess the big part of the website is that it's publicly available, accessible, and we want you to promote that across your network in the industry as a whole. So what is currently being requested? And as you can see, these are just some examples of what is being requested. And so we've got some digitally translated, fact sheets here that, an actual staff member can actually take to one of the aged care residents and say, have a read of this, or to a family member. It is quite anything that you want, we can do it for you. So taking it back a bit, in terms of the insights that we have learnt previously about the use of TIS and as part of the project, we have heard there is low uptake of current translating and interpreting services across the aged care sector. And that's been through our conversations with various peaks and various individuals and also the Department of Health. And that's why this project is really important. And again, we need your help to spread the word that the website is publicly available, where providers can actually get their translated materials to their residents in a timely fashion. So we've also noted in that access to information about available services is difficult to navigate. We've also had insights here where senior people and their family friends or informed caregivers should be considered a primary audience for the range of communication activities across the element. So this point here talks about our communication strategy and just what we need to do in order to ensure that everyone hears about this program. Finally, community engagement is key. So as a consortium, we're very conscious about doing things like this presentation here to make sure that community and communities so broad that communities are hearing about this service and are utilising it. So the audiences and channels. So we've identified, I guess, the translation services. So we've got some key audiences here around aged care providers, senior Australians, aged care peaks and stakeholders across that. And it's our job as a consortium to ensure that we communicate effectively across those audiences. So stakeholders. So the stakeholders, we've identified key stakeholders and groups. So again, we've indicated that, and as Andrew and the team mentioned before at Tears Pickaxe, in our cultural advisory group, CAG, we speak to them on a regular basis, understanding some of the key issues within the sector to help us with our communication strategy and the overall project. FECA, Federation of Ethnic Community Council of Australia, Key Peaks, Deaf, Blind and Auslan Community, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander providers and networks, and government departments and agencies. These are all the key stakeholders that we are working with in order to make sure that the program that we're delivering is fit for purpose. And part of that engagement has allowed us to do things like this, but also most recently, the team had a booth at the AXA conference, and that was such a success, where we talked about the program, talked about the consortium, again, encouraging providers to use the service so that they can really communicate with their aged care community there. In terms of ensuring that when we are speaking to stakeholders, we are looping back, and this is a really key thing that that we're doing. And when I mean looping back, we're ensuring that we're getting the information that we want from them, but we're also looping back to them what we're actually doing. And so with that, we've heard from PICAC and both CAG that there's a lack of Auslan material being noted, and I guess material suggested for the actual engagement and the communication plan being around videos, easy to read messages, icons or pictorial images really do help people who have who consume information differently. And I think that's really important going forward, and ensuring that providers are very much aware of that. And again, the service that we provide, if they're providing us with material that is audio visual, we can do the translation for that. So I guess also as well, the feedback that we've heard is use public cross-cutting channels. So again, SBS, TV and radio, and communicate with home care or residential aged cares that can use interpreting services free of charge. So again, TIS is free, and that is what we're trying to get across as well. Use the service that we're providing, but also aged care providers to use TIS going forward. So our stakeholder engagement objectives. So here we've got just giving you guys a bit of a high-level idea as to how we want to engage the various stakeholders. So we want to promote, we want to encourage, we want to ensure, I guess, we want to promote the new translation service and website of aged care providers. We want to encourage uptake and continued use of the new translation service. And, certainly we want to promote and, to ensure that everyone, regardless of the location you're in, knows about this program. So we're obviously building a lot of stakeholder kits, so some fact sheets, some FAQs, some digital creative content to help with that, and we're utilising the Department of Health's network to better engage the broader stakeholder list. So the implementation tactics. So here, just giving you a bit of an idea as to, I guess, where we're envisaging some of our community engagement tactics, including some stakeholder kits and some flyers and posters of previous campaigns. But this is kind of where we're going. And I guess more broadly here, want to just talk about the overall engagement tactics. Now, again, this is high level, so very much wanting to give you guys a bit of a snapshot as to the tactics, the channels, the audiences that we'll be looking at across all three of both Cold, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and Auslan engagement. So I guess here for the Auslan deaf and blind community, we'll be looking at a community roadshow. So where we'll partner with key peaks and community outreach groups, as there's a high degree of messaging and channels specific with that audience. And so similarly with the Cold and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, we'll be looking at stakeholder kits. Fundamentally, this program is a multi-stream strategy. So looking at the communication plan just very much looks at the primary audience, supporting intermediary and secondary audiences, and also influencers. So who is going to help influence getting this message out that our service is available, and aged care providers should be using tiers to really, engage with their residents. So what can you do to help? As Brett mentioned, we do need your help. We need your help to get the word out. This is a call to action to ensure that communities do hear about this. And again, it is a free service. So you can jump on this website. I know the team's going to pop it on the discussion room, on the discussion forum. And what you can do is pass this on to managers, senior managers, anyone within the aged care provider sector, and say, well, we have these groups of people that we want to communicate this important information to. How do we do it? Well, jump on that and essentially put a request through, and we'll be able to deliver that for you. We really want to ensure that the community get the right information. So with that, I will leave the presentation. So Brett. Thank you, Brett.
And thank you. I'm here. Forgive me, Cabana. I was backstage, so to speak, talking about your presentation.
I love it.
And here you are, coming in early. Heaven forbid. What a team player you are, sir.
I am. Look, I mean, I do recognise, and very much we wanted to really talk about the program, but certainly, the big, as you mentioned, the big call to action is, get on the website and really, utilise the opportunity to get as much information as possible translated across the communities. Yeah.
Good, but I have a question, and by the way, anyone, questions, comments, live Q&A, get in early, please. But my question to lead off with is, it's a skeptical and cynical one as always. There are a lot of digital resources out there. Are you comfortable that we're not overly dependent or leaning upon or putting our hope in digital assets where perhaps we could be going with other tactics?
Yeah, look, I mean, right now, so this is a multi-pronged campaign. So it's very much, there will be different approaches associated with this. But I guess aged care providers do have a lot of complex information that they really do need to get to the the recipients within who they work with within the aged care sector. And unfortunately for them, it is they haven't in the past known where to go. And so the program in itself is very much promoting the services of TIS and promoting the utilisation of the experts in the field to translate information that's culturally appropriate for community members.
Because I think you touched on something. I find there are a lot of fantastic resources out there in every field of the non-profit world, but to get that right person aware of those online resources, or that person to tell their colleague that, hey, you've got to go to this website because there's some fantastic resources. That seems to me a very granular sort of activity. It might, heaven forbid, use good old-fashioned phone calls or someone to hit the hustings, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the experts, especially in culturally and linguistically diverse communities, you could have a very, an English word that you think has one meaning, and you and I might understand it, but it might be completely different for someone from an Arabic background or from a Macedonian background. I mean, and that's why we have a free service for Multicultural Australia. I really like this project simply because in 2008 I started working for the Department of Immigration, and I was using TIS for the first time, helping to speak with clients, and I was like, oh wow, it's such a underutilized service. So to be on a project coming full circle to actually help providers utilize it more and really know that there are experts behind there, I'm really enjoying the project.
You struck on something there too. No matter how well known a service such as TIS might be to certain people, other people who need it just as much have no clue. And if you don't know, you don't know. And it's a churning workforce under a lot of pressure. Questions from the floor. Geraldine Flynn wants to know, what ideas do you have for people who cannot read or write in their own language or read or write in English?
Yeah, fantastic. Great question. And I guess that's, that's where we've got PICAC and CAG providing us feedback around, audio. So, audio assets, using our translators to help with the translating that in voice. So we definitely have, and at LOTE we're very conscious of that there are community members, especially from the new and emerging communities, who having written information isn't their natural form of communication. So we've got to create assets that will help them understand, and a lot of that could be through audio content. And that's why radio is so powerful across communities, because it does allow people who aren't necessarily who aren't reading or writing day in, day out in their own language to actually understand what is being communicated.
And forgive me, Kurana, if you mentioned this, but I'm a big believer in these projects need to be quite long term, and often they can start with a bang, funding dies, and they sit on a shelf, so to speak, gathering dust. Do you know about the future and longevity of this?
Yeah, certainly this is a fully costed program from the Department of Health. So it is a long-term campaign for this. So we're very excited as a consortium to be a part of it, and we recognise it is very much we need to saturate the market and let people know, let providers know that this is important. This is a service that they can utilise instead of using in-house, I guess, culturally and linguistically staff to help with translating. Just use the service.
You've got to become the Clive Palmer of translation and interpretive services. Repeat, add, repeat, add, repeat. I want you wrapping around my newspapers. I want you on every ad. I want you every time I go to bloody YouTube.
Well, Brett, that's what we've heard. That's actually what we've heard from PICAC members, that we need to saturate the market, and that is very much what I think will really get the message home to people.
I often do pop quizzes when I've got an audience. I'm not going to do it here digitally, but there's an organisation I've worked with for many years called ourcommunity.com.au. They do conferences and events, and they have more free resources than any other organisation has created for the non-profit and community sector, about fundraising, about governance, about finding volunteers, selecting the. Sometimes I might talk to 300 people, and to me, of course, they are absolutely bread and butter. To many people, they've never heard of them. I've got a comment here. A Bhutanese client told me today that they did not know about TIS or how to use it. We will arrange a how-to session for them and maybe a how-to sheet. I mean, you've just got to keep trying. Also, you're getting a request. What is the website that we need to go to again?
Yeah, so the team, I guess, will pop it there, but essentially it is diversity aged care.health.gov.au. So DIVERSITY aged care.health.gov.au. So
excellent. That is a wonderful resource. And you seem to have found yourself in the right sort of role.
Yeah, love doing this kind of stuff. From our perspective and from, I guess, the whole consortium, and it's very much about ensuring that the community and both the providers are well aware of this, and it's our intent to really drive home the program's availability and accessibility no matter where you are, and ensure that providers are really putting this at the forefront of their engagement with their diverse group of aged care recipients.
Josephine wants to know, she's looked at the address diversityagedcare.health.gov.au, and she asks, is it correct that you have to request resources?
Yeah, so fundamentally, you can essentially request what you would like to be developed. So you can provide us with a fact sheet and request what you would like to be translated or done. So yeah, put a request in. Our team is ready to go for this. So yeah, pop in a request and they'll be in touch.
So you can't guarantee, of course, every request will be met, but they are considered and they are likely to be taken
request. Up. Yeah, look,
Whoa,
I mean, fundamentally,
every request?
Yeah, fundamentally, look, I mean, we're very much looking to ensure that, again, providers are utilising this service. So where it be audio being translated, being in terms of fact sheets. So yeah, we're very much looking at.
Time is tight, but Ivapine wants to know, does this project go beyond aged care to other services?
No, so it's just aged care. Aged care providers and home care services. So yeah, targeted across that.
All right. So once again, it's up to those other peaks to say, we want something like they've got for aged care, but for disability, but for community services, but for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can, I guess, go out there and, say, this is a great service. Can we replicate it?
Absolutely. Diversity aged care.health.gov.au.
I like that you're repeating it, Brett. I like that you're repeating it. Thank you so much.
I'm a true professional. And it's 16 degrees and cloudy over Melbourne right now. It's 13 past 2. Gubana, thank you so much for your presentation.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Importantly, your work that you're doing on the project is fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Anna, Head of Communities and Strategies with LOTE Agency, part of that consortium. Thank you so much. All right. We're about to talk about some very important changes to the Commonwealth Home Support Program. But let me just try and see if I can pop this live poll on. I believe it is visible. And I just wanted to get, after you've had a chance over lunch to digest what Dr. Norman Swan said about the pandemic, about COVID, about previous pandemics, whether you're feeling more optimistic, less optimistic, or you remain unchanged. I do love watching those numbers vary. unchanged. Even more so unchanged. We seem to be coalescing around unchanged. And of course, that doesn't mean you're positive. It might mean you started off miserable and negative to begin with. Guilty, Your Honour. So most people remain unchanged. 14% say less optimistic, 9% more optimistic. I don't know what presentation you saw, 12% of you who voted for more optimistic, 70% unchanged. It's very difficult to change people's opinions, no matter what we talk about. Thank you very much. All right, onwards. As I mentioned, Commonwealth Home Support Program. Many of you will be very familiar with it. Troy Speirs is going to talk to us about what reforms may or may not be about to occur. Started off as a clinical psychologist, now senior policy advisor with LASER, Leading Age Services Australia. Troy, I want you to know I have emceed several of your national conferences and I remain available again, but get in early, okay, because I'm pretty busy. I thought I'd just put that out there.
I thought you might be busy as an ABC broadcaster or something on the radios.
Always available for LASER. You mentioned, of course, to me when we were having a chat yesterday, the Royal Commission, of course, grabbed a lot of headlines around aged care, made many recommendations. One of them was to create a single program. We want to know what that's going to look like, what impact it might have on agencies, and what it will do for or not for called communities. Troy, thank you for joining us. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to present today around the Commonwealth Home Support Program reforms that are in process at the moment. Many of you in that CHSP space, as we call it, will be very aware of pending changes starting on the 1st of July. Let's get going. I've got a very busy slide deck to introduce you to. So firstly, I just want to pay my respect to elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play across our communities, lands and seas. Today I'm presenting to you from the Dharawal country in the south of Sydney in New South Wales. Today we're going to cover quite a bit of territory. First, we'll have a quick look at the home care reforms in general, look specifically at the CHSP grant extensions for the 22-23 financial year. That then builds a foundation that will lead CHSP providers into the supported home care program design. I'll go through a little bit about what that's looking like. In there, we've got some funding reform, significant challenges for CHSP providers moving from a traditional long-term environment of block funding in advance to potentially unit level funding in arrears, and some of the advocacy work that's going on to try and ensure viability in the sector for what are essential and well-established services in community, and particularly amongst culturally and diverse communities. It is those multicultural services, specialist services that provide a range of community services, not just aged care, and the importance of that cultural awareness and understanding and service delivery models and sustaining those in communities for people to access. Quality reform is another one. Workforce initiatives. The COVID pandemic has really drawn out the challenges around workforce. It's just highlighted what is an ongoing challenge with an aging population, our advocacy and next steps. So home care reforms. What I've got here is a slide that really highlights the current home care system and the vision for the future that's been set by government. We see three different levels in the current system and then translating over to what it might look like in a future system. So the aged care access, traditionally since 2013, been establishing My Aged Care. The ability of communities that are culturally diverse to access My Aged Care has probably been challenging already. The translation and interpreter services have been advertised as a key resource to help connection in those initial stages. What we've got now proposed for the future is a set of community care finders. So how these will be positioned in the community is very much through primary health networks. How they will account for people from non-English speaking backgrounds is another consideration as to how that will be developed. What I do suspect is that those existing multicultural access support services will continue to play a fundamental role in liaising with those care finders to be able to provide access into essential aged care services. We see assessments moving from an existing system where we have dual assessments across a regional assessment service through to the aged care assessment teams. The aim is to move them to a single assessment workforce, and that's meant to be in place for residential care in October this year. Whether that's actually achieved remains to be seen. So let's wait and see where that one lands. And then in terms of actual service delivery, we've got CHSP block funded programs, we've got home care packages, we've got short-term restorative care, which is a program designed to help people coming out of hospital get an intensive level of support over an 8 to 12 week period before going back into their care arrangements before a hospital admission, and then residential respite care. So these programs are all going to be bundled into a targeted program called the Support at Home Care Program. When we think about access, which is the key issue for vulnerable communities and diverse communities, it's a balance between our culturally specific services that have been often built from the ground roots up and a mainstream system that's going to count for the largest part of an ageing population. Our government has its line of sight on that mainstream system. That's where all the money is. That's where the largest part of the workforce is. That's where continuous care for government gets the most numbers and the most outputs. It doesn't mean there isn't a legitimate role for diversity and ensuring those smaller culturally specific services have a place. In fact, there's a role for integration. They're two different models, two different designs, both are valid. The question will be, how will government cater for those niche services in the context of what is reform at pace? The Royal Commission has really set an agenda to get things moving in home care. They've got the CHSP grant extensions across the next financial year, 22 to 23, and then they're moving to a supported home care program from July 2023. That's the timeline. Whether we get there by that time remains to be seen, or whether it extends out is another question. And we will learn more about that once there is an incoming government after the election on Saturday. That's when the discussions will happen. And the important thing is, for both these two service types, workforce, quality, and funding settings, they all have to be configured right. And then there's the process of maturation of service design. It's a journey, an evolving journey to develop an integrated approach. A good example is in residential care. When COVID came in, we had our residential facilities, and then suddenly they had workforce challenges. So the Australian Defence Force is caused in as a surge workforce. In those culturally diverse communities, our cold specific services are the core service. Mainstream services can provide additional support as surge. They provide specialty services, same with medical professionals. They're the specialist services we draw on as a cold specific service, and that then creates an environment for partnerships. Cold specific services, mainstream services, how can they partner together to provide a holistic and comprehensive care arrangement in community surrounding the older people? So for mainstream services, what's the provision to try and ensure we're responsive to the culturally diverse needs of older people from non-English speaking backgrounds? Well, what we've seen traditionally in my aged care is a finder-provider function that has a checkbox for whether they accommodate the needs of culturally diverse communities. They're now issuing guidance, and from July 2022, the intention is you have to be accredited on my aged care to be able to be acknowledged as a service specialisation for cultural and linguistic diversity. They're also going to be looking at training for those community care finders and assessment staff to make sure they, in their assessment, in their roles, are trained around cultural diversity and a culturally appropriate assessment process. So we wait to see how this unfolds. At the moment, we don't have much visibility around this, but this is the intention. It's really around when is the timeline meant to happen. This time last year, it was announced for July. Whether it actually happens in July remains to be seen. We do know this guidance is available on the Department of Health website. The question will be around the time frame when it becomes legislated and mandatory. And a new Aged Care Act will definitely set up the right space for that to happen. For CALD-specific services, these are the kinds of initiatives that you'll need to be aware of. Some 500 community care finders to provide tailored face-to-face support to assist older Australians better navigate and access age and disability care. This is somewhat like multicultural access workers. Now, these are workers that have been existing in communities. I remember all through the 90s, since the 90s, you can see multicultural access workers and the difference they do in linking people into the right types of support. So how these positions evolve across the next 2 to 3 years will be really important. How they will account for cultural diversity is another important question. How you engage with them to promote those that awareness and those needs-based services will be important. Expanding the education role of advocacy services to assist aged care providers to understand the diversity of the communities they're serving. So those advocacy services that you have, they will be networking. Training on cultural safety and trauma-informed care for both care finders and service providers. These services are already in place. They've been set up in the context of the COVID pandemic around trauma-informed care, and they will continue to unfold. And then the other factor that will be really important long-term is the aged care's national data strategy, collecting data on demand with account for variations by people of diverse backgrounds and experiences. So we can start to tailor services and funding and programming into particular communities where we're seeing a diversity. How this will unfold, we'll wait and see. There was a mention of a diversity needs report by December 2024. When that happens remains to be seen. So let's look at the grant extensions. You probably know most of this if you're in the CHSP space. In June 2021, the Department of Health did some developmental work around a unit pricing model for CHSP. Okay, the aim is to move CHSP services to payment at the end of month, which is in contrast to the current arrangement, which is payment 1 quarter of a year in advance. And this is a direct response to from the government to the Royal Commission's final report. The intention of CHSP moving from advance payments to a month in arrears is to set them up for the supported home care program, which is where we see home care packages having landed in September last year. Payment in arrears for services delivered. CHSP will actually be paid not for services delivered, but instead 1/12 of the annual contract, replacing the current upfront quarterly payment. And you will also, as a requirement of that, at the end of each month, need to report the number of services you delivered. So whatever you're contracted for, let's say it's 100 outputs, that's what you'll get paid for at the end of the month. But if you only deliver 80 outputs, then you need to report those 80 outputs at the end of each month within 10 business days. So the government is on a process of trying to understand data month to month to month on activity, rather than the current arrangements, which is reporting data every 6 months. The idea is to create greater sensitivity on demand and fluctuations in demand. And COVID has really highlighted that there will be fluctuations in demand relative to community spread of COVID. So these are some of the things they're wanting to understand more. We want to understand service type fluctuations. There will be different patterns for different service types. The other thing that's going to be really important for CHSP providers is the award changes for employees. So those CHSP providers that employ people on the Modern Award, the SHADS Award, from 1st of July, you'll be required under legislation to ensure your employees have a minimum 2-hour shift on any one occasion. So that might involve 2 clients back to back with the employee paid for a total 2-hour period, or it could be an individual client with a 2-hour shift, or a 1 3/4 hour and a 15-minute travel time being paid to them as a 2-hour block. And these are things that are big changes for CHSP providers who traditionally provide 1-hour services. The legislation requires, if you're going to get an employee to deliver a 1-hour service in isolation, you'll need to pay them 2 hours. So rostering changes become an important consideration. Communication with clients around changes and their need for them to be more flexible to accommodate this legislation will be important considerations. The other aspect is 7-day cancellation notice. So if you change an employee's roster with less than 7 days notice of a change, you still need to pay them for any unworked time or non-productive time relative to what they were rostered to work. So your clients, if they're going to cancel services, it's more advantageous for you in rostering to have at least 7 days notice. But as we know in aged care, that's not always feasible. So there are key considerations here around policy changes. Now, what we have got is Laser is engaging with the Fair Work Ombudsman, who's the regulator of this reform, and the Department of Health to try and get guidance released out to providers around these changes and what it means for their businesses. If you're a Laser member, we have advice that we've been sending out since the decision was made on the 31st of January. Otherwise, you need to be looking at the Department of Health website or the Fair Work Commission website around these SHADS transitional provision changes commencing 1 July. If providers have an enterprise bargain agreement, it doesn't start on 1 July, it starts at the commencement of a renegotiation of that agreement. So you'll have a window period to see what happens. We expect there'll be cost increases, and we expect the department will be looking at your monthly reporting data across the first quarter of 22-23 to see what rates of under-delivery are happening relative to contracted services you're meant to deliver, and then getting an informed understanding around how much has this change increased the cost of care. So watch this space. There's more detail that's going to come out around this across the next 4 to 5 months. Here's our prices around CHSP unit price changes. Now, these have been priced with a reduction that will demand you to collect client contributions, and we see estimates around 10 to 15% client contribution on a price, so that you will be able to match what has on average been cost to serve. So the days of doing benevolent care become more constrained by this unit pricing model. There will be greater pressure on you to move towards client contributions with benevolence or wavering of that fee by exception only, not common practice. So if you're not already aware of this, it's something you need to be working with your executive teams around implementing to make sure you are being paid at a level that is remissive of cost to serve. And that's important. It really highlights you need to understand what it costs at the unit level to deliver your services. If you haven't done that work, you should be looking at unit costing tools. And there are some that are being promoted through sector support development within the CHSP space. And you should be linking in with someone like Chris to be able to find out about these tools to make sure you can get your understanding of what it costs currently, how does that compare with these prices, and what does that mean for any adjustments to the way we do business. When we look at concerns back in July, 800 CHSP providers reported to the Department of Health their main concerns around this CHSP change on 1 July, moving to payment in arrears. So we can see the main issue is cash flow. CHSP providers have been reliant on a quarterly advance payment. They're now moving to a month in arrears. So this is going to be a real challenge for CHSP providers. The other thing that's going to be really challenging is reporting on a monthly basis. The rigor with which and the timing of actually collating the data. If you're using an Excel spreadsheet, it may not be agile enough for you to be able to capture this data. The admin time to reconcile monthly data using an Excel spreadsheet may not be as efficient as you need it to be. You may need to be transitioning to a simple solution that is actually more automated in providing your output requirements. So this will be something we will see emerge across the next 6 months in the CHSP space. And then the other thing is time restraints, data collection, business models, the amount of reform and change management you need to deal with. Again, sector support development officers have been commissioned across through to December to support CHSP providers to build their capacity. So you should be linking in with people like Chris to really understand these. Factors influencing unit pricing, staffing, the level of service. If you provide service in a very niche community, you won't have scale. And so then that creates more challenges around cost efficiency. Diversity of services. If you provide multiple CHSP service types, you have more scale and you have more cash flow. Organisation size, remoteness, specialisation, which we know cultural diversity. If you're providing services into a particular language speaking group, then the scale and the size of that service is more challenged. So this raises a whole lot of questions around whether you will deliver on your contracted outputs at that unit price or whether you will under-deliver month on month, because the cost to serve is actually greater than what the government has allocated as a unit price for contract. The most important thing for you is to be capturing information to justify what it actually costs and why. Reasonable and justified pricing. If you can show that, then that's where it gives government the information they need to be thinking about future costing for niche communities. The cost to deliver a service with a bilingual worker and the time it takes, is it a different cost schedule relative to a mainstream costing arrangement? Those are the things they'll be looking for. Those are the things you'll need to be articulating in messaging what your outputs are month on month. Think about unit pricing a little bit. 4 different types of services in the CHSP space that create differences in costing. There's those service types that at the care recipient level are predictable and regular and have strong continuous market demand, things like domestic assistance. These are the kinds of services the government is targeting in high volume with a unit pricing model. This is the main game, so to speak. Then there's those services for the care recipient that are predictable but episodic. Things like allied health support, nursing support in response to a wound. They have strong demand, but variable demand as well. So the pricing on these is not regular month to month to month. It fluctuates month to month. So this is where monthly output reporting will show this group different from the first group. Then there's those services that are infrequent with variable price points, home modification services, assistive technology services, equipment services. They often are not comparable and they vary month to month. So they have a unique pricing. Unit pricing doesn't work for this, and as a result, they've been left out of this unit pricing arrangement and will be priced in a different way. And then there's those services that are most vulnerable in this payment arrears space, which is those with high fixed capital costs, independent of whether you deliver 1 unit of service a month or 100 units of service a month. Transport services, group social support programs, respite day centres. These have a different pricing structure to what the government is proposing for unit pricing. So as a result, 1 month, 1/12 of your annual contract at the end of each month was a compromise the government landed on to account for these different pricing approaches. The government also promised a CHSP unit pricing policy, but I'm yet to see that. And that was referenced back in October last year. Clearly, they've got their hands full with this home care reform. Not everything is getting prioritised to be released at the top of the shelf, but I would have liked to have seen that unit pricing policy because there are significant impacts for CHSP providers in the next 12 months. And the question will be, how well do they travel and how sustainable is their business in the context of these CHSP reforms? So let's go to the next level then. What comes after June 2023, when the CHSP grant extension process has been completed? CHSP providers have navigated that change, adjusted their operations, have their administration mechanisms down-bedded. Well, the Royal Commission and the government's response is to establish a single support home care program by July 2023. There are a number of markers that need to be met initially. And there needs to be a count of fixed and variable funding, as I've just indicated in the different CHSP service types. I suspect there's been limited consultation with care recipients from culturally and linguistically diverse communities. But this reiterates that the government needs to undertake a considered consultation with service providers providing the niche services in these communities, so they don't just get tacked on the side, but we actually see this realisation of two different models that both have a place in providing comprehensive care. We would expect the same with Indigenous communities. We would expect the same with veteran communities. We would expect the same with LGBTQI communities. So again, the government's focused on that mainstream service. Once that's bedded down, the question will be, what will be these other mechanisms for these other niche services? Well, we see a lot of recommendations on the table. These are the home care recommendations of the Royal Commissions. I'm not going to run them off one by one. You can just see in red this single home care program by July 2023. No wonder the government is so busy at the moment in trying to get things across the line. There are multiple things they are juggling in trying to implement home care reforms. The biggest challenge will be doing them to time. I suspect once we have an incoming government, we will start to see a considered process around changing these timeframes. Supported home care program. There's a number of elements to this. In January, there was a supported home care program overview put out. I'll go through some of these points in a moment. There was also a consultation calendar put out that goes through to June. The main thing to say about this document is that it's meant to be producing consistency of approach to assessment, service provision, funding and fees through a single program rather than CHSP and home care packages. It will also reduce inequity of outcomes and complication in accessing services and confusion of approach across these two service modes. It will reform all aspects of delivery of in-home care. The important thing to note, though, is that while it's pitched as offering more individualised support and choice, it may instead restrict choice to reduce cost to government, very much in line with the changes that were proposed to the NDIS and then rejected. So we can see the lived experience of people in the NDIS space, and any providers that are delivering NDIS services understand this intimately. It's not tailored, it's not flexible enough, it's quite rigid. And we see this disconnect between care management and care delivery that also creates complications. The key problem with the approach being proposed for supported home, people are assigned a very specific package of support at a fixed price with very little opportunity to shift services around, increase support as needs change, or purchase supports not on the service list, or choose fewer hours of support at a higher price from a preferred provider. And let's face it, if you need a bilingual worker, that's a preferred provider, but the cost to deliver that service may also be higher than what it would be from a non-bilingual worker. So these are the things that potentially may reduce flexibility, reduce choice, and actually create challenges for delivering responsive care. We know that in CHSP, services may be more predictable. So this fixed assigned package might be okay, but we saw home care packages introduced because more flexibility is needed, more agility for a service, wraparound service response to be created relative to preferences and needs. The question will be, will we see that agility in this kind of approach? And these are some of the key advocacy points that are being discussed between consumer peaks, the Department of Health, and aged care providers. So let's look at funding and reform. A new assessment tool will be introduced in July 2023 under a single assessment system. Suite of assessment instruments and a tiered approach to assessment based on screening with 4 levels, basic through to complex assessments. We would expect the skill of the workforce to be different from one to the other. There's no transparency at the moment regarding the design of the assessment tool. It's a closed consultation with an advisory group, and there's been research with senior Australians that were assessed using a prototype tool, no visibility on that, and the advice is limited. The key challenge around assessment will be, does the tool do the job at picking up everything that a consumer needs to be assessed against? The next part is the assessment workforce skilled? Are they skilled around cultural safety and cultural needs? And what is the scope for reassessment if they get it wrong? If they come to you and there are gaps in the support plan from that assessment by that assessor, can you go back and communicate those gaps with an expectation that there'll be a rapid response to get everything set up? This is the kind of thing you've experienced in the CHSP assessment space with regional assessment services. It remains to be seen how well this will work. I expect there will be a period of refinement, and we need flexibility in that initial period to make sure you can do things as quickly as is needed by the consumer. Here's the kind of approach they're thinking about in terms of classes for levels of need. So how intense is the support? How much domestic assistance? How much personal care? How much nursing care? How much social support group activity? The first 12 months and the rate of reassessment will be an indicator of how well this actually works. We wait to see how that works out. The other thing is they talk about 7 service classification categories: independence at home, social connections, personal care, health and specialised support, care management, digital technologies and respite care. This will be very topical. The more categories, the more restrictive it is. The less categories, we see 3 categories in the NDIS, the more flexibility to move things around. And in fact, we've seen in the NDIS as the program's matured, the provision to allow flexibility to move funding across categories. That's starting to look more like a home care package kind of flexibility environment rather than the CHSP service list environment where NDIS started. So there are real questions around, is the NDIS approach the right approach for us to be taking, given older people, as their needs increase, agility and flexibility become really important. And you can expect as a CHSP provider, you're going to need to be accredited against each of the final service categories at a cost recovery accreditation approval process. So this is something to be aware of. There's a service list, much like in CHSP. Providers may choose to offer additional service outside that service list, but clients will need to pay for that as a full fee service. From our data, about 10% of home care package services don't fit into the categories. So there's an adjustment for CHSP and home care package providers around how they're going to communicate with clients around, sorry, that particular service is not going to be funded in support at home. People will be able to swap services within categories, and there'll be a price schedule attached to the service list with the Independent Hospital and Aged Care Pricing Authority, once established, determining what those prices will be. The key questions around this is, will flexibility provisions be adequate? In the short to medium term, there needs to be more flexibility to deal with things not working as well. And that's about the 1 million clients in the system at the moment. So they don't have their care disrupted. We haven't even seen conversation about transition yet. We're just trying to get design, yet we're meant to be there in 12 months' time. Clearly, there are issues of concern. I don't need to state the obvious. Thin market viability grants. So this might be something that's relevant to those small, culturally based, multilingual service groups that offer a range of services, not just to older Australians, but to younger groups within these culturally diverse communities. The department's consulting on a funding pricing model for these diversity groups. We're interested in principles to inform the balancing of a variable activity-based funding approach, which is this unit pricing, paid payment in arrears, versus fixed blocks funding, which is more like the CHSP space. It's not one or the other, it's a combination of both. What's most important for smaller providers, you need to know up front what your funding is so you can forecast and plan. This idea of a thin market grant, if it's a limited funding pool, who's going to be prioritised to access it? Is it going to be a big enough bucket of money for the 25% of SA2 regions that are classified thin markets across the national aged care landscape? So there are real concerns that the detail's not on the table and that we need the detail on the table before a minister signs off on this. So other considerations, individual support plan, a point of delivery payment platform. If you haven't seen this, this is a major shift in approach. It allows clients and providers to go into My Aged Care and submit an invoice, reconcile it with Service Australia making a payment. It's very different to home care packages and very different to CHSP. They're also talking about client-facing apps so they can self-manage and do this invoicing themselves. So it's very much looking at that kind of Mabel, Uber model where clients can deal directly in a marketplace to purchase their own services with functionality around claims and payment attached to My Aged Care. Again, can this be achieved by July 2023? The timeframes are probably too tight for my liking if this is where we're going to land and this is where an incoming government signs off on. And then sector consultation through to June. Pricing design consultations meant to come up after an incoming government has been elected. Quality reform. So there's now a revision of the aged care quality standards underway, which was a recommendation of the Royal Commission. We're looking at potentially 7 standards. This will come out into public consultation in July and August. The question will be, how will accreditation align to this? And how will quality indicators in home care align to this, given we've heard they're going to be coming out to measure client outcomes and client lived experience. So for people who live in cultural specific communities, their lived experience is going to be a key metric around whether care is person-centred. And who delivers that best? The CALD specific services or the mainstream services, or a combination of both? So that quality indicator data is going to be really important to help consumers choose, where do I get the best experience? Quality definitions will be emerging in the new Aged Care Act, with draft legislation due for public consultation in August this year. The review of the aged care quality standards I've just referenced is due to be completed by December. Quality indicators are meant to be expanded in resi care and introduced into home care by the end of this year, but may be delayed. Star ratings for residential care, where you're able to compare how people perform on a range of underlying variables that contribute to a star rating, meant to be in resi care by the end of 22 and then home care by 2024. So this is where your systems around administration and data management will need to become more sophisticated to feed into these quality mechanisms. A very different space to your traditional CHSP block funding. We're moving from a cottage industry to a highly regulated environment for vulnerable older Australians. And then the Serious Incident Response Scheme, you've probably heard about that. It will be in your grant extensions that you'll be needing to report on serious incidents. And the question will be, when will this be introduced, given an incoming government and when Parliament will sit to consider legislation? Workforce initiatives, 2 key strategies just came published in March. One is an aged care workforce action plan. There's some 40 initiatives mentioned in there. And then a national care and will support workforce strategy, which goes through disability, aged care and veteran care. So looking at the care workforce in general. These are both documents that you will need to become familiar with. The Aged Care Workforce Plan, it outlines 3 key goals. One is to grow the workforce. Let's see where we come around increased remuneration. It's very topical in the context of the upcoming election. Skill development, training programs, and enabling strategies that develop sustainable, coordinated approaches to skilling up the workforce and supporting them in terms of the types of care they need to provide. It's important to know that only around a quarter of direct care staff in home care packages were from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, with lower levels in CHSP, and that this data aligns with the National Skills Commission Care and Support Workforce Analysis. So the question will be, where do these workers sit? Are they in the mainstream services? Are they in the CALD specific services? Are they bilingual? That whole strategy around demand and how you as a CALD specific service might work in partnership with mainstream services to make sure you've got adequate workforce is going to be really important in providing that responsive care and being able to show yourself through quality regulation mechanisms as a provider of choice when it comes to lived experience and the outcomes you're achieving. In terms of advocacy, well, there's been a number of things that the aged care peak bodies, LASER and AXA, are doing. There's been the Aged Care Reform Scorecard tracking on the Royal Commission's reform progress. So if you're an AXA member, a LASER member, you will have seen this document released in December, and you're seeing communication starting to come up now in the lead up to the election on how the government is tracking regarding the Royal Commission recommendations. We've seen LASER back in November release our home care pricing and market stewardship research report. This provides data around what it costs or how providers are priced within the home care package program and the variance that exists around the mead, knowing that prices are diverse. No 2 service models are the same. No 2 costing profiles are the same. There needs to be variance around a unit price, not just everyone charges the same, because all that will do is drive everyone to provide the same product, and that's not where quality is. We see surveys around the providers and care recipients' experience of support at home. We've done this in the last couple of months. Interestingly, out of 220 odd care recipients, existing care recipients, about 50% were not aware of the supportive home care program activity. For consultation, that raises a key question around adequacy of government's communication around reform. For providers, considerable concern around how confident they feel about the design that government's taking, and also the level of difficulty, considerable levels of difficulty in actually transitioning into this new environment. So that's going to potentially lead to disruption to care. So there needs to be a very careful transition process. Now, there's been work led by AXA for a group called the Support at Home Alliance, and there's a document there, Seamless Aged Care, that's available on the AXA website, Aged and Community Services Australia, that talks about a different funding model that has better account for that fixed advanced care funding, as well as activity funding, which is paid in arrears month at the end of each month. It recognises that that model is going to be operational in residential care from October this year. And if we move to operate it in home care, we'll have greater potential to set up home care and residential care as a seamless continuum of care, with the only thing changing is accommodation, from home to independent supported accommodation through to 24-hour nursing residential care. So that idea is around a better account for aligning home care with residential care rather than home care with NDIS. And that's the key tension that's on the table now in terms of advocacy in looking at the refining of home care design. And incoming government will be really important around where this tracks. And the other factor in there that's critical is the merger between LASER as one aged care peak body and AXA as another aged care peak body into a single aged care peak provider body from 1 July, called Aged and Community Services, Aged and Community Providers Association. The Alliance, number of organisations, including the New South Wales Ethnic Communities Council. If you are a member of the Ethnic Communities Council or well networked, you should chase them up and ask more about this. And there's also support and development work through Professor Kathy Edgar's group at the University of Wollongong. So what are the next steps? Well, this is what the government has said. Finalise the consultation around the Support at Home Care program with a webinar for the sector in June to announce where they've landed on their proposed revised design that's been informed by consultation. Now, it's important to recognise that the consultation is more on implementation than design. They've already designed it. The consultation is just like, what's the impacts of this design? What does that mean for implementation? What do we fine tune? It's not genuine co-design around how do we design services for culturally and linguistically diverse communities? How do we design services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities? This is our design. How will culturally and linguistically diverse communities work and access this? What extra mechanisms do we need? Very different fundamentals from where we start, very different approaches, consultation versus co-design. So let's see where that lands. The next one will be an advocacy approach, engaging with an incoming government and minister. So the Department of Health will be going to the minister. All the peak associations will be going to an incoming government minister. And the question will be, where will the incoming government land on approval to proceed? If the Department of Health's plans play out, they'll get an approval, revise the New Aged Care Act, which is being developed at the moment as draft legislation, and put that out for public consultation by August this year. Through that consultation process, they will then have that prepared to submit to Parliament in February with the aim to get that legislated to commence 1 July 2023 for the Support at Home Care program. That's a very conditional time frame on a lot of approvals. Any delays, it's going to push things back. The question will, how much will it push back? I know for CHSP providers, in the amount of work that you need to work through to build your services and see and work through viability matters, the more time you've got, the greater thought you can put into that transition and getting your services and your workforce across. 1 million older Australians, over 1,500 providers in the home care space to transition. Is it achievable by July 23? And how will delays or progression of those reforms evolve based on the outcome of a federal election? This is where we are at the moment. The direction and the realisation of a better program is there. The question is, how does this finalised design evolve? Will the program design achieve the desired outcomes in its current form, or will we need to revise that? And how open is an incoming government? How strong is an incoming minister to be able to navigate the reforms to get the right design for the current and future generations of older Australians? Really important questions, really important time to be watching this space. And that's it for me, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. That when you use that phrase, when we chatted yesterday, reform at pace, it did send a shiver down my spine. And these reforms are big, and they are going to spread far and wide with people, whether they're ready or not. You have, the devil's in the detail, and you are so across it. That was a supremely valuable presentation. I know there are questions. You've got time to hang around?
Sure.
All right. I've also got a poll that I'm going to do in front of you, Troy, whether your presentation how has it left people feeling too, by the way. Some questions Fiona McKenzie asks. I would hope the new integrated assessment tool uses ICHOM standards for older persons. Do you know if it will, Troy?
No. So interestingly enough, the aged care peak bodies, provider peak bodies, put their hand up to be part of an advisory group for the assessment tool. We were left out. So we weren't included, even though we represent a larger number of providers that will be impacted by the outcome of assessments.
Goodness me, that's
Again,
disappointing.
Where is consultation?
Where is consultation? Where is the taking notice of what you hear when you when you
The
consult?
thing I can say to Fiona is that the government's current process for development of the tool, they're meant to be finishing a set of trials. They're called living lab trials. And the question will be, how transparent will the data be on the outcome of that come
Yes.
June?
And if it's not transparent,
we'd be advocating the government for a transparent process so we can seriously consider how much error will be in the assessment, because that all translates down to you, the provider, and the kind of things you need to be contending with, whether it's in a funded or unfunded capacity. And we know in CHSP, you've been doing that in an unfunded capacity.
Troy, is there any justification? Heaven forbid me asking. You've got a public position, I know, but is there any justification for a government that's spending billions of dollars of public money to not be transparent about the results of a trial that they will run that will have fundamental changes to the way Australia operates?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
The challenge in this space, Brett, is the balance between policy, good policy, and politics.
Yep.
Politics is driven by 3-year election cycles. Good policy for aged care doesn't operate on a 3-year cycle. Yet we see Royal Commission recommendations come out February, March 2021. We see an election 12 months later. So a government's going to develop a response that says we can deliver on these reforms within the next election cycle. Vote for us. We called the Royal Commission. We're committed to aged care. And they probably genuinely want to, but the politics of the day demands deliver in a 3-year period. What that, to me, Brett, looks like is a boat left the port, but it's not seaworthy in 3 years. Instead, we take the SPAC filler and everyone's filling up the holes along the way, hoping the boat doesn't sink, and trying to keep everyone in the boat not jumping out, which is what we saw in the NDIS. A lot of people jumped out of the boat, and it just left a lot of poor experience for care recipients.
Particularly with NDIS, the hope that was around it before it was actually instigated. Now it seems as if there is just not quite universal, but just overwhelming disappointment. Another question from, I've lost it myself. It was regarding those monthly outputs that you mentioned. And the questioner said, the outputs will vary each month because of factors such as, are there multiple public holidays? Or when cultural groups have religious events such as fasting, will these impacts be understood and expected? Not doing so ignores people's and their groups' intrinsic values. That's from Jackie.
Yeah. So really good point, Jackie, is the quality of the data being collected. If we're collecting information on diversity, country of origin, whatever the data points they're collecting for a CHSP client in that registration process, we want to be looking at that data at a granular enough level to see is the activity levels month on month for particular cultural groups different from the general cohort. This is where we start to see niche, those unique differences. Now, you will provide anecdotal incidents of it. The New South Wales Ethnic Communities Council will go to government and advocate on particular issues that their members are talking about, and then the department goes to this data to see whether it's actually reflected in the data. So the question, you'll be right, there'll be for certain service types, trends from month to month, and the question will be around how are they going to account for funding? Your fixed costs need to be funded whether you get one service for that month or 100 services for that month. If it's not done that way, it may not be viable month on month. And that's where we'll start to potentially see a reform agenda, see people getting out of the boat.
Yes, this seems similar to me than the world of disability employment, which has had reform after reform, and over